are you gonna have us do introductions? Because I know some
May
people,
as
but
well. I mean, we're all cool, articulate.
Where's the
people.
goats?
I feel like we should. The goats are right behind me. You can see.
Oh, the goats are there. Lisa,
The goats. The goats.
Lisa, get the goats. Goats. Sorry.
Intro the
Lisa.
goats. Intro the goats.
Where's the goats?
Intro the
Where's
goats.
Oh, this is Lisa, by the way. Hi, everyone.
Immediately derailed.
There's one.
There, the goats.
Goats.
Honestly, Kathryn, that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
And,
bye.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry,
bye now.
okay.
All of our chickens, by the way, we're just starting to let them out, and they all hang out under the blueberry bush. I don't know why. Like all 11 of them. Just
Because
wanna
of
be
the
under
blueberries?
Yeah.
There are no blueberries there. No, I don't know why. They're not ready. They think it's safe. They think it's happy. I don't know what's going on.
I think Under the Blueberry Bush is a great children's book about chickens hanging out. I'm into it.
It's a real book?
No, but it ought to
No.
be. I expect you'll
You
write
are
it.
going to make it, is what he's saying.
Thank you.
yeah, this is like. I thought the theme of this meeting was we plan out Alex's creative projects for the next 3 years.
I think Alex probably already has more creative projects planned out like than all the rest of us combined.
Not true, I'm sure. This is a pretty good group. But yeah, I mean, because we are all cool people who know things, I figure why not? We could record this, and if we're happy with the discussion, maybe this is something we share. So in that spirit, maybe we do each give a little, 2-sentence intro to who we are. And if I guess I'll vaguely moderate. So based on what I see on my screen, I'll start with Jessica. Who are you, Jessica?
Okay, I'm Jessica Outlaw. I'm a VR AR researcher based in Portland, Oregon, and I'm really interested in how embodiment changes attitudes and decision making.
Lovely, articulate. David, you. David Liu.
Next.
David Liu. Now
Hi.
it's you.
I'm David Liu. Hi, everyone. I'm a VR creator producer, used formerly of Viacom Nix and worked in volumetric capture. Really huge on social VR and just how people stay in it, honestly. I'm currently researching retention and engagement in social spaces, digital social spaces. Yeah.
Cool. Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I am a
Robot.
theater director, mostly working in VR and AR these days, with a long background as an artistic director in comedy and downtown theater.
David Gochfeld.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to this question. I'm also a theater creator and a technologist, and I've been working on making theater in VR basically for the past few years, all as part of sort of related to research questions of embodiment and presence and how to create sort of social communal experiences and just how to tell stories using the medium.
Kathryn, you.
I'm boring. I always struggle with this because I have like 18,000 different titles. I am about to enter my second year of my MFA program at USC Games, so the Interactive Media and Games Department, where I am interested in themed entertainment and virtual reality. I also am one of the co-founders of the Here Summit and Festival, as well as the forthcoming Here Institute nonprofit for the advancement of immersive arts and entertainment. And I'm the executive editor of No Proscenium, where we cover live action role-playing, alternate reality games, virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, immersive theater, escape rooms, and everything that touches those areas.
And you said you were boring.
Yeah, so boring.
Man. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean. I'm a VR developer, Unity person, but I also used to be an actor, and so sort of swung back and forth between being like a tech person and a performer over the course of my life. When the sort of first headsets came out, I got all excited about it. I'd read Snow Crash and the Diamond Age more specifically, back in my youth, and had been waiting for the technology to catch up with the idea. And so when Mind Show showed up, I did a lot of Mind Show, made a lot of videos, and just really liked the idea of performing and interacting, but wanted there to be other people in the space. And so my professional job is building AR and VR stuff for like the pharma world. But in my free time, I'm playing a lot with Normcore and getting good at putting people. Yes, I got the t-shirt. So yeah, so that's me. And I lived in New York forever, and I just recently moved to Portland, Oregon.
Oh, cool. Excellent.
Oh, you moved.
Yeah, got kicked out of my house.
You got kicked out of your house?
Well, yeah, I lived in this lovely brownstone in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and got bought by some rich people, and they liked our apartment so much they said, "We want your apartment," and kicked us out.
That sucks. Sorry to hear that.
That's okay. My in-laws and everyone are here in Portland, and it's gorgeous here, so I am not complaining.
And last and probably least, Kent Pye, where we go. Oh, I can't hear you, Kent.
Kent, you're on mute. Where's that voice of VR? I don't hear it.
I know.
The voiceless of VR.
Still can't hear you, Kent.
Uh-oh, audio input.
That's really sad.
Oh, I know.
I so badly
Our
want this to be
resident
invisible.
podcaster, no one can hear him.
No, nothing yet.
We could do the theater game where he
Hold
talks
on,
and somebody
can you-
else does his voice.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Sorry, it's not my Roland isn't picking up. Sorry, it was picking up from my Valve. Hi, my name is Kent Pye, and I do the Voices of VR podcast. And for the last 6 years, I've recorded around 1,500 interviews, published about 2/3 of it, so about 900 of those interviews so far. Just really interested in covering the entire industry, but particularly stories and immersive stories, I think are probably some of the most interesting philosophically, just because it's like I see the most innovation happening there with the frontiers of immersive storytelling. And what I am really interested in is the philosophical frameworks around like experiential design. So what kind of trade-offs do you make and what kind of experiences do you get based upon the infinite number of things you can tweak? And so really looking at those different trade-offs and trying to come up with some patterns after seeing over, thousands of different experiences over the last 6 years. So yeah, I have lots of thoughts on the underpresents and some of those different trade-offs. And Alex, you have to introduce yourself as well, because I'm not the last, so I wanted to pass it back to you.
Okay, fine. Alex Coulombe, creative director of a New York City XR studio called Agile Lens. Been very excited about specifically VR since 2013 with the Oculus Rift DK1. Always had a very strong passion for emerging tech and architecture and theater. So the fact that there's more and more opportunity to bring all those things together now is incredibly exciting. But the best kind of one-line sentence I've been able to use lately is that I'm interested in creating virtual architecture, virtual theater, and then everything in between. Or put another way, virtual spaces and all of the interactions that can happen inside them. So to kick things off, let's first just establish, we've all seen the show, right? Kent and Kathryn got to see it a little early.
Yep.
When did Kent and Kathryn see it?
Let me check.
It was the week before, it was like the Thursday before I put my podcast out. So whatever my podcast came out last week, it was the week before that, so 2 weeks ago.
Great. And then the rest of us saw it between Thursday opening night.
I have not actually seen it because of the
No,
time.
no, kick him out, kick him out.
Spoiler alert! You're gonna get
that's
spoiled.
No, it's gonna ruin it.
I have no
you can't
problem
be here.
talking about performances
right.
before I see them. So, but there was I think.
I hope you have the strongest opinions out of all of us, David.
Well, I have some very strong opinions about their front of house experience and their ticketing system.
That's
so
right.
I'm happy to communicate
That's
those,
right.
but
That's right.
I'm
Story
really
time.
interested to hear more about what your experiences were with the performance.
Wonderful. Well, I guess I'll mention at the top of this for anyone who isn't here but is watching this that I did just write roughly 6,000 words about what I thought about the experience. So people can go read that, but I really want this conversation to be more about what everyone else who hasn't had enough time to express their opinions thought. So I think maybe Jessica has seen it the most recently. So I just wanted to start with what was your initial thought, Jessica? What did you think? Was it what you were expecting? What was your takeaway immediately after the experience?
In terms of what I was expecting, I thought that I was surprised that it was audience-led performance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've never experienced before. In terms of what I have experienced in immersive theater, I have seen Then She Fell. And what's the Macbeth one?
You mean Sleep No More?
Yeah, thank you. And with that, like I felt like when I was there at those live immersive experiences in New York, I was on the periphery, but I wasn't able to influence things in a way that and in this one it felt much more like I was central. Like I was given a character to play. My character had a name. I had a very specific role that I had to execute. And I think that's something that that is going to, like, because I don't have a performance background, it was not something that I necessarily like was expecting at all. It was something that I got into, and it's something that I would go back to the Tempest to do again. But I think that's a real like flipped model of how to do theater. And I think it's also very clever because it means that you can put on more performances for more people with just one professional actor. So I found it clever, but you know, like I've also seen The Tempest. I've seen the movie, and then I think I also read the play when I was in high school, and I didn't necessarily like. I felt like The Tempest was like The Tempest seemed to be peripheral to what was going on, and it was also very. It was just, you know, like part of what theater is like conflict and resolution, and for this it was much more like I didn't feel conflict at any point, really. Yeah, so I'll stop there. But yeah, I found it, I would recommend it to people. It is very innovative, and I would really like to see other models of ways that the audience is the performer, because I think that's really, really novel.
Yeah, when Kevin, David, and I, and then Brandon, who's not here right now, had our initial postmortem, I think some of us were feeling like maybe we were curious also what a slightly less participatory version of this might have been like, where you are kind of taking on an emotional arc over that 40 minutes. Did anyone walk away from this kind of craving that, or when all was said and done, were they like, yeah, it was really great to be a part of it and that totally worked for VR?
I think I did a podcast on it, and I didn't really talk too much about my direct experiences because I was trying to keep spoilers out. So, but since we're kind of in a spoiler-free zone, what was interesting to me actually was looking at your experience, Alex, and then comparing it to mine, and then seeing like how much the difference of the temperament of the person who is the docent or the actor or whatever you call the facilitator of who's the immersive, the reactive actor, immersive theater actor, that there's a temperamental balance. And I found that maybe your, because I did an interview with G, and your actor was G, and she seemed to focus maybe a little bit more on giving tasks and emphasizing agency, whereas in my experience, I think I had Kelly, she was much more about like really trying to set up a scene, and like she was like, okay, try to communicate with me, and I would try to non-verbally communicate, and then she would kind of extrapolate what I was trying to say. So there was actually like a give and take where I felt like I was given the freedom to be able to actually show a little bit of my character. There's later when we were asked to embody the characters, and she's like giving the lines and she's performing the lines, and I'm like sort of embodying what the lines are. And she said, oh, you're doing a really great job, or something like that. And it was just like, oh, like I feel like I matter, and that what I'm doing here is actually contributing to how this is unfolding. And I felt like that liveness of participation where I was able to participate in it. But at the end of it, I think I had a similar reaction to Jessica, which was sort of like, oh, well, that's it? Like, is there more to the story? Like, it didn't feel like there was maybe a building and releasing of the tension of the story being told. So I felt like I had seen like an immersive theater performance of The Tempest before, and I felt like I got a better sense of what the story of The Tempest was. And then this felt like maybe a little bit of a taste, but more of a experiment in group dynamics to see how you could be, cooperating with other people. But this dialectic between the agency of me as the user versus how much I'm passively receiving the amount of story that's being told. And I felt like the docent or the actor that I had, Kelly, did a really great job of trying to balance telling of that story, whereas I think maybe it just kind of depends on what actor you have, that maybe they're focusing more on activity or high energy or, go explore, stuff like that.
During exploration, did anyone find anything that they got particularly excited by? After I listened to Kent's interview, I mentioned how I was really excited to feel that tension between being a part of the narrative and wanting to explore the world. And I didn't feel necessarily like there was that much value in exploring the world. Like, you found objects and they had something to do with the Tempest. And it seems like some of the hosts will explain like, books, I spent too much time reading and that's why I was betrayed. But there weren't really puzzles to solve, and there wasn't really a lot of, I want to say, learning or value add to the exploration as I might have expected.
I mean, yes and no. A lot of those environments are really, really beautiful, and I've heard from the developers they're actually higher poly than the rest of the Under. So to me, just like being around those environments and just getting a glimpse of what the team can do was just beautiful from like a set design perspective, particularly when your host leaves you alone for a few minutes and you're supposed to eventually discover this dinner table, but having done it once already, on my second time, I wanted to kind of like teleport around, and I ended up looking down into the ocean from this gorgeous cliff as the storm started. And I was like, whoa, this is a really interesting and unique moment. And I don't think I've experienced something like that in VR. And actually, in terms of like dramatic tension, like I felt like that might have was supposed to be like the high point in terms of some sort of conflict or bad stuff happening. And the first time I went through it, my actor Tarrant really played it pretty straight. And then the second time I went through it, I had a different actor, Witten, who I think more quickly admitted like, oh yeah, this spirit, it's me. Like, you guys can't get me with your swords. And then it became a little bit more playful. So I'm wondering if like that's just like a lever that they're pulling like up or down.
Yeah, I definitely compared both my experience, which was, I think it was James, which was, like he played that balance between being really straight, but also like serving the performance versus any agency on the part of the players. Like, and there were only three of us. So it's like, you had two big variables, right? Like the number of people, I know this makes a difference, and also the docent themselves. Like, I watched Lisa play hers from the outside, and she got Deirdre. And there were like 5 people in hers as well, so there were just more roles for her party to play. And her docent did this really, really clever thing where there were moments where I knew was certain set pieces for mine, like, and James just sort of made us sort of play those activities. Whereas for Lisa, they did little games to make it seem like they were responsible for the set pieces. So if it's your first time going through, it felt like they were responsible for pushing the story forward. And it made them feel more involved with the overall theme and story versus, from my experience, it just felt like a series of workshops, which I enjoyed. But it was just more like, all right, now you're playing this person, you're playing this person, this person, and now action, right? And I was like, okay, this is fun, but I really didn't feel the tension or any resolution or any conflict. Whereas Lisa did seem to feel a little bit of that, from the outside, at least from my perspective. She's in the background, so I'm not going to speak for her too much.
Yeah, David, did you do the like 4:00/7 o'clock show on Thursday?
Yeah,
I was also I was in a group of 3. At the start, there was a person whose mic wasn't working, and they dropped out.
That's our show.
That was
you.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was Miranda. Who did you play?
Oh, you were a beautiful Miranda.
Thank you.
Yeah, just the way you moved, it really evocative.
Did you guys get married?
No, I was sort of peripheral. I was the other character in sort of all of the scenes, just with Big Rough. But yeah, so I absolutely agree with your take on it. It felt like I appreciated that. I thought the actor did have some knowledge of the play and like was sort of dropping some lines here and there and sort of giving some almost like dramaturgical context to what was both the play itself as well as what was happening in the story, but I didn't necessarily feel like fully like empowered to move the story along or be the center of the story, whereas I feel like some other people have said that they definitely felt more like they were pushing the story forward.
It sounds like a lot of us had pretty good audiences we were with. I know Kevin did not. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the folks you were in the experience with?
Uh-oh.
I mean, they weren't aggressively trolling or anything. It was not, it wasn't VR chat. They didn't give a shit. They were interested in seeing the experience and seeing the land. I have no idea. I also missed much of the introduction at the top at the campfire because my internet dropped. So I came back just as we were like conjuring the storm or whatever it is that we go to where we're in the ocean. And I actually loved all of that. And then everything after that was watching my host, whose name I missed because I was out for that moment, desperately wrangle the two other like players in what felt very much like a corporate retreat. Like I felt like, as a person who has done an enormous amount of like teaching a thing I love very much to a bunch of people who have to be there in order to get their sick pay or whatever the fuck. I felt like I just felt so much for the actor who was desperately trying to get these other people to do a thing. And frankly, I hate participatory theater. I mean, I hate participating in theater. I'm like obviously produced an enormous amount of immersive and participatory shit, but like I never, ever want to be asked to do anything at the theater. I work at the theater. I expect when I go to the theater to pay not to have to work at it. And so I was already also like, oh, don't fucking make me be something in this. That's not what I'm here. If I wanted to play a video game, I'd play a video game. All of which is to say, I don't think that, I mean, I had a pretty terrible experience in the like more audience focused or player focused moments because the people I was with didn't give a shit. And I was already mad about having to do stuff for them. I watched the thing, I'm sorry to be ranting so much about it, but like watching the initial aerial monologue and prologue and the thing where you're on the water and then you're under the water and those fucking wrist fishtails was like easily top 5 theatrical experiences of my life, like immediately. And I have seen a lot of stuff. And then they were like, and now it's your turn. And I was ready to go home. So that was my feeling. And I felt like the two people that stayed also similarly were like, okay, well, this isn't for me. I'm going to go play where I can go play.
So Kevin, would you have any thoughts or suggestions about how they could have structured things in such a way that it could still have been a more rich experience, even with audience who were not as interested in being engaged that way?
I think that somebody referred to, I'm sorry, I think it was maybe Kent, said like the sort of dramaturgical awareness of the piece. I felt like the parts where he was sort of talking us through what happens in the show, that felt more like he was acting than like he was desperately wrangling. And honestly, like I finished the thing and I've directed 12th Night and I was like, wait, what is this play about? So I didn't feel at all attached to the story, and that like, and so my experience could only have been improved by having more storytelling and less desperate preschool wrangling.
Sorry, Kevin,
again,
you directed 12th Night or The Tempest?
I'm sorry, the Tempest.
Okay. Similar story.
I was gonna, yeah, well, you know, clowns and monsters.
Right.
It all blends together after a while.
I think it's that they both open with a storm, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly, shipwreck.
Yeah, good old shipwrecks. Kathryn, how many times have you seen the show now?
I've seen it once in press previews, and then I wanted to see what the public experience was like. And then kind of to what you were alluding to earlier, when I was in there for press previews, the lobby wasn't quite done yet. So there were certain aspects of it that I wasn't able to explore until I tried to join the public showing. And then given all of the kind of sound and other technical difficulties, my public showing, I was actually the only person for like a good chunk of it. So
Wow.
that might also have contributed to how much I liked it, because it's literally a one-on-one with an actor for a good 10 minutes
Weird.
until the second person showed up. And it was like, I really need your help to tell the story. And I look around, I was like, oh, right, you can't do your job. It's just me. Okay, I'm every role now.
So how many of you had a full complement of 6? Is it 6 audience members that they're supposed to accommodate? So only 2
I
of
had
you
3
did.
other,
Uh-huh.
but there was 4 in mine. Yeah, I think the one sort of, I guess, theoretical question is like, if you kind of know your temperament, like Kevin, if you know you're maybe want a little bit more of a passive experience, and you're matched with people on the opposite end of the spectrum who are like hardcore gamers who want to break the system, like maybe there's a way to balance those, or maybe there's a way to for you to be paired up with somebody who's going to maybe lean a little bit more heavily onto the Shakespeare acting aspects of it, and maybe have you do some light interactions, but not have you do so much critical parts. And then it seems like there's some of the immersive actors that are on the opposite extreme that try to really focus on high energy, hyper agency, and that maybe part of it is an alignment to recognizing what your temperamental center of gravity might be, and then what actors, if they're able to self-declare what their center of gravity might be, and then be able to sort of match those up, or alternatively, use that diversity of those different roles to be able to create something that no matter what you have like a combination that is able to make it like overall a balanced experience.
I assume that there's got to be some version of that, right? Like I assumed anyway, since I only had half a crew, that they were like, well, this is the 3-person version, and perhaps there's a little more who wants to do this, or a little more truth to like, would you like to element, which felt very like performative. But I also think like it becomes a marketing question in a little bit, in as much as I think it's not knowing what I was getting into was a big part of why I was excited about this. And so it's not like I knew that there was going to be some level of interaction and some level of engagement. And again, I think like I'd have been more open-minded if I felt like anybody else in the group was more excited.
It's funny because in the normal multiplayer space, they actually kind of do have a penalty box.
Mm-hmm.
They can teleport you into these bird cages above the stage, so you can still see what's happening with the performer. And maybe like after a while, after you calm down a little, they like let you out of the box. But here, because people are paying and it's like a per ticketed instance thing, I'm not sure how you could account for that.
That's what I'm hearing from you, Kevin. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, you're fine with high agency like situations. It's less about you don't want to perform, right? Like like there's a difference between performing in a show and like being released in a scene for you to engage with. Because, for example, like Adventure Lab is high engagement, but you're not really performing. So that distinction is. Sorry.
I'm sorry. The interim moments where they're like, look in this mirror and do this funny thing. I was also like, go fuck yourself, man. Just put me in the game.
Yeah.
So I do think to some extent I've just been in this too long to be an ideal audience member. And I mostly just try not to make the hosts feel bad, because I've also been in that position a lot.
I think that's a really interesting point, is that, there are audiences out there who want very interactive, pieces where they have a lot of agency, a lot of participation, and they're the people who seek the one-on-ones at Sleep No More, right, and things like that. And then but there's also a huge audience for people who want a little bit more of a lean back experience and really just want to experience the story in a different way, right? And so it sounds like, I think it's partly a marketing thing of this, could maybe make more clear that it's calibrated for a much higher level of interactivity and less about the story of the Tempest. I'm interested though that they don't seem to be. I mean, it says that they're selling out, but people aren't showing up for shows, and I'm really curious what is going on there with that, because it seems like there should be it seems like there would be a lot of pent up appetite for these kinds of things, and you would think that people would show up and really be there.
Also,
if I think about what the Tempest, if I think about like what the goals were of the creators, and the main basis I have for this is Kent's interview with Samantha Gorman, but when I think about what their goals were and how they wanted people to feel, I think in a lot of ways it seems like they were able to accomplish that. See, what the things that we're saying, like some of the things we like and some of the things we don't like, but if we think about all of the things in the column of like, how do they want people to feel, what did they want people to experience? You know, this is not the most ambitious play ever. Like, they wanted to give people of agency and interaction and live theater. Like, what are, like, are there things that we think the creators set out to do that they didn't accomplish?
Well, it's this tension between agency and storytelling, and I think that's like the fundamental heart of all of these tensions. And there seems to be like a dialectical relationship where if you have one extreme, then you take away from the other. And I think they're doing things that are giving embodiment over to the actors who you have limited amounts of communication, but then you're asking them to be able to then perform. So it's a new mix. And I think my takeaway is that it kind of like, I don't necessarily think they've hit like the perfect balance of that in this piece. Like, when I see Sleep No More, I'm like, wow, this is a real huge innovation when it comes to adding the right amount of agency and embodiment to an experience that feels like I could go through it like 30 times and I would be more than happy to, like, the depth of which that the more that I explore, the more that I'm rewarded back with my agency. But in this case, the agency seems like it's limited. Like, the more that you invest in that, you don't get as much return. And so whether that means building out a more robust world, or how do you maintain, like, okay, everybody come back and now let's focus, and I'm going to tell you a bit of the story, and kind of this push and pull between gathering everybody together and sort of guiding them through this story versus like exploring around. The thing that I loved about the Tempest was the changing of the scenes and being transported into like this state of awe of like, oh my gosh. And then Kelly, the actor that I had, she was really like setting the scene and giving context and telling the story when I would go into those. And then it would kind of be more interactive and different. So yeah, for me, it felt like it was a good balance, but still not like magical, perfect combination of everything that I feel like I could go through again and again and again and again.
Yeah, like the aspect of storytelling, like I were saying about like the balance in storytelling, and it does feel like it was weighted more heavily towards agency in my experience.
Sorry.
What is it?
Okay, so Third Reel does a really good job of balancing the two, and I want to sort of take a step back. I don't think it's actually in a linear, mutually exclusive spectrum, and I think Third Reel does a really good job offering both, right? And the way to do that is allowing you, like, having performers actually perform for you, but giving you spaces for you to participate in as well that are not necessarily part of the narrative drive. So that way, the actors themselves can propel the narrative. And in between those moments, and sometimes even with the actors, you can have a hand in exploring the space, playing with the actors, but not necessarily performing with the actors. And I think there was potentially an opportunity here for them to do that as well. It's just that they veered more on. And look, this is a project that was done in 2 months. It's kind of crazy what they've done in 2 months, and it's not ambitious at all. And I think it's perfectly fine for what they've accomplished. So I think this sets a really good bar for them to start iterating and adding more layers too, because this bar is good. It's, you know, we're being very good critics here, but this bar is like good, and anything else that can sort of iterate from this point is just gravy.
They made something that mostly works and takes place in VR, which is a very rare accomplishment, especially to be at this point where they can crank out 4 shows with, you know, 8 people per show, with 11 hosts all simultaneously at the same time. It's an excellent foundation to have. Really quickly, I want to give Brandon a second to introduce himself, because anyone who's just watching this and is like, who's this guy who's appeared and hasn't talked for 20 minutes? Brandon, who are you? What did you think of the show? All that good stuff.
Hi, folks. Sorry for just jumping in. So yeah, I'm Brandon. I'm a creative director and choreographer, and I blend theater, dance, and technology and immersive and performance. So when I found out about this project, I was freaking the hell out and was so excited to see that they were, the Tender Claws team was taking this next step, because that's what I was hoping that they would do. As someone who was kind of a supporter of them from the beginning of Under's launch. I echo a lot of what has been said. I think that it's important, I think, for anyone evaluating anything in this moment, in this project, to remember how fast this thing was made and how remarkable it is that they pulled that off. And it is so impressive. And I think the fact that there are things that can be pulled at shows that it's at a level that's prepared for that, right? Usually there's so much, I know I've consumed so much VR that it's just not good, and it's not even worth this level of discourse, to be frank. So the fact that we can do that, and we have this diverse collection of people with backgrounds that come from all the angles that can like get in it, shows how good of a job they did. I think that the thing I'm hoping for more of is to kind of what Kent was getting at, is seeing that next level and that balance of where and why we're interacting with them, and what the tone is, right? So personally, I'm not the type of person who enjoys an actor breaking the entire wall of the world and just like making a joke with me. And like some people like that because it's like, we all know it's all pretend, but like personally, I'd rather be fully immersed in the world, or if they're gonna break and have their own versions of the performance, for that to be like intensely on rails and they like really know what they're gonna do at any given moment. For my taste, it was a little loose. But that's also, I'm excited to see more performers do it, because I've already heard in talking to a lot of folks that it was very different depending on the actor you had, which people were getting at. So that's kind of my initial thing that I've just been mulling over as I'm listening to everybody.
So
And
anyone
you
who's
first
seen it,
saw the Under in Sundance, right? That was like
Yeah.
January 2019
I think it
when
was,
they first started.
it was 2018, I think, because
2018, yeah.
yeah, because it came, I believe, yeah, because it was a while after it came out. I have to look, but yeah, I think it was 2 years ago at Sundance. It was the very early iterations of it. It actually may have been, because it came out in November, so it may have been like 11 months from when I first saw it. I think it came out in November, right, last year?
Yeah. I saw it at Indiecade, and it was still not even launched yet. They didn't even have a date for launching it at Indiecade last year. It came out in November, and I remember very distinctly the actors were supposed to be done by the end of March. Like they were not planning on keeping them on full time. Then that turned into June, and now that's turned into September. And a lot of the actors I have met, I've seen them in real life immersive shows, and they're like, this is the first VR thing I've ever done. Like the controllers were foreign, the Oculus was foreign, and then they have their own UI where they can conjure items, teleport you, make themselves huge, make themselves tiny. And for like an immersive actor who is not a gamer and is not a VR person to pick all that up and also know how to improv and remember you and give you a nickname and give you a role and, oh, okay, you're a duke now and you're a goddess now and boom, boom, boom. Oh, now we're under the ocean. Okay, now we're back at the house. Like that is super impressive. And I think one of the reasons why we are all in this, right, is because we see the potential, but we also have to acknowledge how much freaking hard work has gone into this.
Yeah, it was 2019. Just I checked real quick, and it was at the beginning of last year. So.
And I know for a fact they've patched it like 3 times, which is why some of the original shows weren't full. Like I know there's still like an EU time zone bug happening right now.
Yeah, I'm interested to see just how they and us and other people who are sort of thinking about this sort of figure out that scale between people who want that laid back. I'd even imagine a way of being a participant where you could ghost yourself out entirely, so that you're not even like physically present to anyone else there. Yes. Okay. So, Kevin's going to sign up for that one. But then there are other people like, I don't know. I know a few of you who've played the Under Presents, like the game, and done time mode and spent time in there and solved the puzzles and like maybe even like got on the Discord and were like, oh, well, what are the secret spells? And, there's the potential for like, people having very like deep world knowledge and understanding the mechanics of that world. And even the lobby, I know that like, the group that I was a part of, I think had no idea that, there were things to solve. And then if you like looked through the bottles, you could find stuff. And I would love to eavesdrop on a conversation like this with people who have very limited VR experience and just get their sense of, you know, what it was like. Whereas, you know, I know for some of us, we're like, oh, okay, well, you know, this button didn't work, or, you know, it's sort of, you know, wonky.
So that brings up another question, like how much of their audience are people who haven't really done any VR before, right? I mean, at this point, most of the people who have VR headsets are people who have been doing, you know, have VR headsets because they're interested in VR and have been trying things, or because they're gamers. So is this an appropriate calibration on the agency versus narrative scale? Is this an appropriate calculation if you assume that most of your audience are people who are more active either in gaming or in VR in general, versus if we were in a point in time, which may or may not happen in the future, where hopefully VR is a more widespread medium and we have more people who are interested in just coming in for the story and not for the interactions?
Well, they know that exactly, right? Because it's on the Quest and it's now. So anyone who can do it owns a Quest and probably just plays games, right? And that's because of what's in the store.
It's who the audience is right now.
It is just that is it, right? And so they know what they're working with, which is actually really great for them because they're able to form an experience around that. But like when I turned my headset on opening night and I saw the main cover banner of my home say Tempest, I was like, holy shit, how cool is this? A play is the home banner of the Oculus store? Woo, I'm gonna remember that. So that means a lot. And I am so excited for what that alone does for the culture. And the fact that Oculus Studios is backing them is really something. And I'm excited to see, and I would love to have more focus groups and demographic knowledge about who these people are buying tickets, because they are the folks that can be converted to live performance as well. Because I always find that this work is a gateway for that, in the way that branded immersive is a gateway to immersive theater. So yeah, Kev.
I think that's really true, all of that. And I wonder also, like, by using a sort of curatorial model with Pi-hole, or at least like pulling from the like pseudo avant-garde, let's say just like very downtowny theater scene, which is inherently a little bit alienating. And I mean, you can make the argument that the avant-garde theater movement was in fact created to alienate. And so as we start to bring theater into this extremely commercial, otherwise extremely commercial venue, I think things like this Tempest or The Under in general, I think you're going to open a lot more doors for people who are gamers, who are interested in the fact that, like, in the thing that is otherwise specifically alienating to commercial audiences, which is like, this is weirder than you're ready for, and it doesn't provide easy answers. And if you don't even know what questions they're asking, then you don't know what the fuck you're looking at in the first place. And I think all of those elements are much more appealing to an audience of like youngish, future tech thinking gamers than to a commercial theater audience. You know, I'm never going to get a Broadway audience to come see a show that at the New Ohio, but like to get an audience of weirdos to the New Ohio to see something that I'm saying is specifically weird, if I avoid calling it theater, it becomes an incredibly easy job. And so I think there is some extremely smart capitalization on our lack of a specific culture in this medium right now, and that the Under is really like hitting it on the head by saying, like, we're going to be weird and a little bit confusing forever.
There's a bit of a chicken and egg problem here with games versus experiences or stories, immersive stories, because starting with games, obviously, but the film festival circuit has traditionally been the place where a lot of these immersive stories have been shown, but yet often those will make a festival run and then spend sometimes a year or two before they come out. And then there's not really the audience that's been cultivated because the distribution channels for those are so poorly developed. And some of the games will come out, they'll be attacked because they don't have good enough ratings. So this is something I wrote a piece in Immersed News online about with what's happening with the ConXR and the VR Ham, with having things like the Museum of Other Realities to be able to do this virtual distribution of some of these experiences and these stories. And I reached out to Coulombe Slevin at Oculus, and I was like, yeah, there's like this huge problem of like cultivating an audience for stories. And what he said is that actually what they're doing is taking the Oculus TV app, and they're making that the central point for all of like curating people that are specifically interested in stories. And so if you look at Oculus TV, you'll see all of the immersive stories that are apps and interactive. There are 6 Degree of Freedom experiences in there, but also 360 videos. Like in my mind, when I think of Oculus TV, I think, okay, that's just going to be all the 360 videos. But they're actually thinking of that as like an alternative, like app distribution model to perhaps maybe start to curate and cultivate more of a listening for these different types of experiences. So it's still very early, but as we look into 2021, Oculus is going to start to have like something that's an alternative to SideQuest, which is, you know, maybe Oculus Share 2.0 to get more experimental narratives or experimental games, indie games that aren't up to polish, but also enterprise channels. So you can see like broadly that they're trying to diversify away from just gaming and create other ways to be able to cultivate audiences that may be interested in something beyond just the gaming experiences. So I'm optimistic that that is still at the very beginning, but still has a really, really long way to go in order to really like cultivate that larger audience.
More weird art, please. VR needs like the equivalent of itch, right? Anyone can make some sort of PC or Mac game and throw it up on itch and get money and reviews and ratings and spread the word. But, you know, sometimes I have to talk to new Quest owners and be like, all right, here's like the 15 things I recommend you download. And then they're like, oh, how often does new stuff come out? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
SideQuest.
But even on SideQuest, like there's limited plethora, and I think it's all about the critical mass of creators, developers / audiences on that platform. So more people need to get headsets. More people to play with it. I think I would love for an itch to happen. And I think the problem there right now is just not a lot of people have Quests.
And David, go ahead, Kent.
I was just going to say, in more conversations like this, because the challenge has been, hey, you have to go to Sundance, Tribeca, South by Southwest, or Venice, spend thousands and thousands of dollars, be one of like a handful of maybe 200 to 500 people to get to see these experiences. Yeah. And then there's no critical discourse or no ability to actually talk about it in a way. I talk about it on the podcast, but even when I put it on the podcast, it's like, if you didn't see the experience, then you're sort of missing half of what this is all about. So this is a great opportunity here for us to actually get a group of people together to talk about it. And then people could potentially then go see it and then continue that conversation. But I've just found frustrating to have these different types of conversations because of the distribution. It's like I said, that chicken and egg problem. And I think just having people like us that are watching it, talking about it, and then encouraging more people to have more of these experiences.
I've been encouraging every immersive theater person I know to buy a Quest, and they are slowly getting them, and they're slowly getting into VR for the first time. But every single time like the store page went back up, it was me DMing like 5 friends, like now, go. Don't care what the capacity is, just hit buy.
Yeah.
You're going to love it, I promise you.
And do they?
They do, and it of course takes a few months for it to come out. So to Brandon's point, some of the people are actually buying and opening the Under for the first time because their Quest was on back order for months.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd like to imagine that folks like us and others who are seeing the show are also going to be sharing their Quests and trying to say, like, hey, mom who loves theater, like, try VR because now here's a piece of content that is right up your alley. I mean, I mentioned in my article, my wife doesn't like the Quest. There's a lot of things about it that bother her, make her sick, and it just gives her headaches. And this was an experience where for the first time she felt comfortable being in there for 40 minutes. And I asked her at the end if she felt ill. And she said, no, I think the story, I was so engaged in the experience that actually helped a lot with the nausea. And that doesn't tend to happen to her with like video games. So, there's a lot of opportunities here for this to ripple out, not just from gamers, but to other people who like the non-VR versions of these things, and then can start to see a way into VR through experiences like this.
Yeah, total shout out to Lisa as well. Same thing. She hates VR so much, like with a passion. But on Twitter, she saw the Tempest and she's like, you know what, Dave, maybe I should try this. I'm like, really? You want to try it? And she signed up. I was shocked, and she had a great time. After the whole thing, I thought she would hate it, but when I asked her about it, she was like, no, I actually really like it. Like, will you stick it all? No. So, surprising.
It's
there you go.
Like you can expand your audience if you have a diversity of content built into the form. Wow! Oh my goodness! Not everyone likes to shoot people. What a concept!
Hey, sometimes you punch people or you saber them.
True, but maybe sometimes
you just saber fruit.
Yeah, but maybe you don't want to attack and you want to just be Miranda and get married. You know, that's fun too, and that's great. And
I think,
yeah, I'm imagining the Sex and the
exciting.
Sorry, Kevin.
I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, it's really exciting that this is happening, because this is what I have been trying to say to the headset manufacturers for the past 4 years. Is like, look, you know, there's more than gamers out in the world, and if you really want to get your headsets to, you know, to be a sort of a thing that's as common as TVs, you need to make a variety of content that's going to appeal to people who are not gamers. And you know, now finally we're looking at, finally Oculus, I guess, has cottoned on to that and is really focusing on that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, is anybody gonna want to discuss the irony of Oculus using TV as the pointer for where you should find narrative stories?
That came to mind. I just don't want to bring it up, but let's talk about it. Oh boy.
But, and this segues a little bit, David, you were talking the other day about how you worry about experiences like this, though, being side by side with, you know, free experiences that you pay once and then you own them forever. So the pricing is also kind of an interesting discussion point here, because, I mean, I think we all can agree this is absolutely worth $15. But as we do start to see more VR content like this coming out, that's like pay per show or supernatural with paying for subscription models, do we feel like this, well, what David was proposing was that this should be in like a separate kind of world or category from all of the other stuff. But I'm just curious to hear what other people think about pricing and what the future of this might look like.
Well, I'm imagining this is pretty subsidized. So like, I don't know to what degrees, but it does seem like the price may be a little unreasonable in terms of what other people are going to be able to reasonably do, just because of the building up of the under and the whole infrastructure. And it's unclear as to how that arrangement was made, but I know that because it's exclusive to Oculus, then I can just imagine that there's got to be some degree in which I think you mentioned that, Alex, if you kind of do the math, then it doesn't really necessarily add up for how to really sustain this at a large scale. So yeah, I mean, that's my only concern, is that maybe it's like artificially low, but maybe that's what they need to do to be able to actually get it bootstrapped so that there's an interest enough in audience to be able to expand out in the future.
Does anybody know, have they published, do we know how many headsets are in the wild? Quest specifically?
I've been looking for that number, so.
Yeah, I keep looking for real headset numbers, and they don't seem to be anywhere. Nobody seems to be publishing them.
Publicize them either.
The closest you can get is apps that are pretty ubiquitous, and they would know because they have tracks for how many numbers. But if I were to guess, it's probably somewhere between 800,000 and over 1 million, maybe over maybe at a high end, maybe over close to 2 million. But, you know, we really don't have any clue because they haven't published anything. They've only published the amount of software they've sold, which is they've said they've sold over $100 million worth of content. And that happened at like an exponential amount faster than how long it took for the Rift to be able to sell the equivalent. So it was maybe 8 or 11 months or something like that, where it was like over 2 years or something for the Rift. So it was faster, but the amount of content sold is not like a good proxy for how many headsets that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also take into account the fact that there are tons of corporate clients. Like in my case, different projects, we've bought 20, 40 headsets for different things. And, they get loaded with an application and then sit in a storage space for the rest of their lives. So, shed a tear for the unused headsets of the world.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's it is a figure that you absolutely need in order to build any kind of theatrical business model, is the max cap. And if we have no idea what the max cap is, then it's entirely everything about trying to build out a working theatrical business model becomes hypothetical.
Yeah, you can't model any of the finances. You can't estimate. You can't pitch. It's tough.
Well, and again, presumably if you're working direct with Oculus, then they have those numbers, right? So they can do the modeling. And so, but that kind of means that, anybody who's trying to make anything and doesn't have direct backing from the headset manufacturers can't do the modeling.
An inability to physically walk into a room and look vaguely at how many seats there are in there is a weird level of a weird lack of transparency for a business model that's been around for 20,000 years or whatever.
Right. And we presumably won't ever even get the numbers of tickets that the under has sold, another thing, right? So we can't even use that as a benchmark if we're trying to model out something else. I mean,
But
it'd be great if we could. But
they should.
It
would help the industry. There's no reason to be secretive about it. Like besides hiding that it didn't do well, but it's like there's no benchmark, so didn't do well doesn't exist, right? And it's just like tell us so people can actually talk to others, get interest, and connecting to what people were saying before. Like, all I want to do is show every theater person I know this experience and get it on their face so I can be like, listen, this is what I've been trying to explain to you for the past 2 years. It's happening. Climb on board. Let's go. And if I can have a little numbers, as Kevin is saying, like that helps these old-fashioned people who like to think that way. And then you also can get the forward-thinking people that once they put it on, they're sold, which is honestly most people. They just need to do it.
I mean, the other, sorry. I'm sorry. The other thing is that we have these models for not-for-profit theater that nobody's turned a profit in theater in years. And what is it? 1 out of 5 Broadway shows ever hits. So the assumption that
oh, Kevin.
Oh no, we lost Kevin.
He was about to say something so interesting.
I know.
You froze, Kevin.
You said the assumption that
the assumption that we should be trying to finance this the same way we'd finance software is crazy. What we need is rich people who have an investment in the culture, who are desperately trying to get a tax.
Yes, right. Worked so far.
Yeah.
I think someone must be listening
Kevin,
to what Kevin's saying, and they keep freezing his video.
I mean, desperately
We're
trying
being
to
watched.
what? Desperately trying to what?
Get a tax write-off.
Yeah, get a tax write-off.
Yeah.
Or they need to figure out a way to sell beer or merch.
Or their name on the little tag on the back of a seat.
Yeah, right.
Donor walls.
What'd be great is if somehow this either gets to Coulombe and Nelena's team or whoever is in charge of that arm of Oculus so that they would know. I feel like they have been hearing from the community and they just don't have the resources to support it, or they don't, or it's not part of the strategy. I just feel like there are not enough people at Oculus who represent the interests and the needs of this community. And I think they're trying, right? I think Yelena's support of the Under is the reason why it got made, and the reason why they can even ticket directly through Oculus. Adventure Lab can't do that. It's a more onerous process to get a ticket through Adventure Lab right now. And there'll be others who probably won't be able to do that for a while because they're probably testing with the Under. So but guess what? Networking is important, and who you know matters in this industry. But that's the way it is, and that's just the state of the VR market right now. I feel like there is a little bit of, there are silos, and I think the more people you can get to these platforms, the more people who are at the leadership position who can speak for these communities, the better. And it starts with conversations like these.
And that's okay. Do you know what I mean? I think it's important to say it's okay that they are figuring it out with this app. They found really smart people to do it with, and they're working out kinks, and they've delivered an experience that is pretty damn seamless. And like none of any things, like I was saying before, like that are troublesome with it have anything to do with the technical side. At least for me, I was like, it just works. And the fact that it just works is out of control. And so having them take the moment to figure out the ticketing with them, and then hopefully they want to open beyond that, whether it's within the under. I know some of us have had wishful thinking that that can become its own like theater company that has residency things and stuff like that. Or if it just extends beyond that app and is just something creators can do in the Oculus store. But I do think that it wants to find its own, they have to reevaluate how the store functions for that to really make sense. Because, and make it feel like more of an ecosystem as opposed to like a virtual version of Best Buy. Cause like this shouldn't be, or like any art experience I might make like shouldn't be next to Beat Saber. It shouldn't. And I actually wouldn't want it to be. So yeah, that's something that will, maybe that's that Oculus TV idea, but that is a thing that does need to get slowly figured out as they open the doors.
Yeah, and I'm actually been historically a little bit more skeptical around, the emphasis of numbers. I understand that they're very valuable, but I'm hesitant to make an argument that you have to have the number in order to do it. I mean, you could potentially, through back channels, get some information from Tender Claws and, but even if you had those numbers, would that still allow you to do what you need to do? And I'm not sure it would, because it feels like it's also like cultivating an audience that you need. And also when I asked Samantha, I was like, because the Under Presents is like way different than anything else that's on the store. And I'm like, I asked her, I was like, well, there's so many established metrics that all of the other things are looking at. And it's so different, like, are you able to show different numbers that are showing the metrics for success of this as an experience? And she said, yes, actually. And we've been trying to, she didn't go into what those specifically are, but kind of alluded towards something that's more of like engagement or daily active use, or, how much time are people spending, and, looking at those other maybe more qualitative aspects. Is that there may be other ways in what the Under is doing, is that there's ways of measuring that success. And maybe that's through secondary information, through like Discord communities or networks that you have established. Like if you can already establish those networks and have like a community that's ready and hungry for this type of content, and that is likely going to be maybe a higher metric for success, rather than knowing what a sort of theoretical business model might be without having all these other infrastructure pieces in place.
Yeah, I think it all comes down though to funding, right? I mean, as somebody who's been trying to raise money to do various VR theater pieces for several years, it always comes down to, well, we can't give you money because there's no ROI. Like even if you sell tickets, you're not going to be able to pay back what it's going to cost to make it. And certainly, I think it's still, going back to Kevin's thing about the nonprofit theater model. Yeah, we probably won't make back in ticket sales, but at least having some sense of, what the reach is, just in terms of sheer numbers of headsets. Yeah, it's true. Having the engagement numbers also, like how many of those people who have headsets are actually using them, as opposed to them just sitting in a storeroom or sitting in their closet or something like that. But we have to start somewhere. And I think the real frustration is that, there are a lot of people who have really exciting and interesting ideas about pieces that they're ready to start making and cannot get the funding for it because the traditional funding models still apply, which is that you have to show that you're going to sell enough copies of your game to make it worthwhile.
Does anyone
Curious,
think
David, about your box office experience? You said you had a lot of opinions about your experience at the box office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue I had with the box office was that, they say that the time that's shown in the box office is your local time, but there's no way to check that. So unless you are in fact alert when the Oculus store email comes in saying you've purchased this showtime, which I wasn't, because I assumed that when I clicked on the 9 p.m. showtime, that was the ticket I purchased, and that's what it said in my mask. But then when I showed up yesterday at 9 p.m., I was never taken into the show, and it turns out that for some reason it thought I was, I guess, on Greenwich Mean Time or UK summertime or something like that. And so, and there was no indication in game when I purchased a ticket or when I showed up to use the ticket that that was what had happened. So that's a problem. And I think it's also a problem that there wasn't somebody online at the time that I, could communicate with. I mean, when you sell tickets for live show in the theater, you have front of house people, you have people in the box office at showtime, right? And there wasn't anybody there. So I think there's a lot of, I have questions about the idea of selling tickets in game in general. I understand why it's a good idea, and it does make it maybe a slightly smoother experience, but it also means that there are some other problems that are attendant to that I think need to be worked out. But also, like, something as simple as sending an email the day of your performance saying, hey, we're great, we're looking forward to seeing you at your show tonight. Like, all the other systems do that, right? I get that for any Eventbrite I sign up for, or for Adventure Lab, we got that. At the very least, they could have done that.
Or in the future, it would be cool if there's like a new platform that like there's a little notification in Oculus Home that like has your calendar, right? And it's like, you have a show tonight and it's at 9 o'clock.
Right. A ticketing central that's a separate, that's a thing that's built
like
into the
beyond,
Oculus Home.
It's not just inside that experience, but it's aware of the fact that like it's a moment in time you're going to take inside your headset. And it can break the boundaries of the app. And that's pretty cool because it can then show that these experiences aren't just isolated to these different apps.
I feel like we should probably...
Oh, sorry.
Right, Kevin.
I was just going to say, I did find it sort of charming that in order to double check the day of, I was like, well, shit, I got to go into the under and look at the inside of my mask. And I think that would be less charming third or fourth show. But for now, there was something really nice about needing to go someplace else to find out this information. Felt like a relief from my smartphone. Yeah,
but it's weird because you wouldn't, again, if you're going to theater in the real world, you'd take your tickets out of your pocket and look at them, right? Or
yeah, absolutely. But this felt like this was just as easy to put on my mask, to get into headset and put on my mask, as it would be to like pull tickets out of my desk drawer,
It kind of feels like part of the onboarding, which is quite nice. Like, for anyone who actually has gone to a physical box office to buy tickets, there's something kind of cool about like, this is the theater where I'll be next week to see the actual show. In a similar vein too, I wonder if anyone kind of missed that's the exit version of that, where when you come out of a show in the real world, you're there with all the friends you went with and you can talk about the show right away. Mm-hmm. And in this, you're just kind of deposited in the lobby. You're roped off, so you can't even explore the puzzle elements there anymore. And then you're just popped back out into the not even multiplayer, I don't even know what they call that space, but where you see the under and the theater. And I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on how these kinds of discussions that we're having now could be integrated a little more into the experience, where once the show's over, there's a social stage 2, anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, I think we've been talking about with VR pieces for years, we've been talking about how onboarding and offboarding are really essential elements to the experience that are often given short shrift. And I understand like buying the tickets in game is actually a great way to really start the onboarding at that point. And also really important because then you know that the person who's buying the ticket has already figured out how to run the game on their headset, right? I get that that's actually a really important step. But yeah, I think when thinking about these experiences, what should that onboarding be like, and how do you make that really a more embracing experience to bring you into whatever the experience is that you're creating for them. And then, how do you then ease them back out into wherever they go next?
Yeah, I think they save themselves a lot of headaches by not allowing people to talk and, only having the clicks. Like, it really, you cut out a lot of bad behavior that way. But at the same time, I agree. I would have loved to have, and I would have found out after the show that, my beautiful Miranda was David, and that would have been a great additional reveal in a way. But alas.
It's surprising. So they don't let you out in the bar in the under. They just let you out in the marquee area, because that at least it's like when you come out of Sleep No More, you come out into the bar, right? That seems like, or in any theater, you come out into the bar area, right?
But then he would have just been a mask who clicks, so I wouldn't have known who it was. But
although the Discord has gotten pretty good at, like, people have certain totems that they use to represent themselves. So at least if you're in that under community, there is some way to identify who certain people are. But you're not going to be able to talk to them, though. That all still happens in another environment. Although Elena did mention, like, well, you could set up an Oculus party, and if you do know the people you were in there with, or even just the people at the same showtime, you could still have an in VR discussion of some kind. So there are ways to do that, sort of. Kent, I'm curious, because I remember in your initial thoughts after Sundance or whatever it was when you saw the under, you seemed a little bit trepidatious about the fact that you can't speak, and that I think you said that you saw that, like, people were communicating by throwing bottles at each other, and you weren't sure at the time, like, how well that was going to work. I'm curious if your thoughts have changed over time about the audience model in the under.
I don't remember that being a problem when I first saw it. If I gave that impression, I don't stand by that it is a problem. I think it's a creative decision they made. And as I make that creative decision to limit how much of the abstractions of language you can use, it forces a different type of embodied language that I think is actually very interesting, and actually goes into what they were trying to create with their deep inspiration of the journey. And so when you're talking about, like, hanging out afterwards, then it's still, I think they still want to really preserve that mystery of having encounters with people where you're not needing to become emotionally invested one way or another, and to limit the type of actual spoken language you can have, because who knows, they may not speak English anyway. So you're able to maybe have different types of interactions with people. So yeah, I mean, the thing that I guess is I'm more interested in, if I want to go into the experience with somebody that I know, it seems to be fairly hard to buy a ticket plus one or two tickets, where you can guarantee that you'll even be in the same show. That to me seems a little bit more like of a use case that you're like, hey, let's go see this together, and that you're actually in the same experience that then you could talk about. Because if you go and you're in the same time and you have different actors, it could be a completely different experience. And I think part of the joy of seeing art like this is that you get to talk with people that afterwards, even if you don't get to talk to strangers, because like at least that. So if I were to do anything, it would be to ensure that you could go into the experience with people and maybe have a party and be able to secure certain tickets so that you could be sure that you had a similar experience. Because I think it's too hard of a problem to do the debriefing or offboarding, and with the constraints that they've chosen, which is to not speak. I don't think it's just as interesting. There's not much of a catalyst there. When I was done, I was done. I was ready to go back to my day. I'm happy that we're talking here, and maybe that's the thing, is that you can it maybe force other people to come together and other mediums and other domains to be able to talk about it.
Right, like even that's a choice, right? And like there is precedent for it. In Sleep No More, you go in, and the pioneering thing was that they take you and they intentionally try to break you up from your friends. Maybe they don't do that as much anymore, but back, I saw it like the first year. So they would physically take you and separate you and push someone out the elevator and shut the door behind you to make sure your parties are separated. And you are thankful for it, because you then are anonymous in the day, and the night you can do whatever you want to do. And that is so amazing. And it pisses some people off tremendously because that's not their style, but then other people love it, right? But that is a choice. And if that's, I think, what they're doing by keeping us silent with each other, they've invented this entire, or cultivated entire culture and language around these gestures, which obviously as a choreographer, I think is like out of control amazing. And like, I just heard about this totem thing talking to a super fan last week. And I was like, damn, that is so cool. And I think that they're leaning into it, and so that's fine, you know, and it does actually force you to come out the other side and have this type of conversation where you compare the shows. And really, any immersive show you do, that's what you want to do, because everyone usually has their own unique experience, and that I've personally always had a better experience when that's the case in live work. When I come out and we have a different experience, you go, oh, they did this, oh, and they do this, and guess what? I'm gonna buy at least one more ticket because I want to see a different host. So it helps the business model. Like, it's all to me, it's like all makes sense as a full package. And like, it's not for everyone, but that's okay.
No, I'm 100% on board. Like, I actually like that we were in the same group so that we can have these conversations. You know, it turns out that Sean was Mike the whole time, but what do you know? But one thing that sort of took me out from that was the actor being very self-aware that they were a performer in Los Angeles and you hear the sirens. So it's like that creative decision was like, oh, come on, no, just sell me the fiction of the under. Tell me you're from the under. You know, like, I think that took me out of it for a minute, and I'm curious to know from Samantha and gang, like, why they made that creative choice. Because I'm like, no, don't tell me that.
Because all these
I like the fiction.
These actors, when they're in the under playing, you know, Crazy Cat and all these other characters, they never say, like,
exactly,
I'm in Los Angeles. They stay in that character the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that either.
I've got a theory as a person who has done an enormous amount of this kind of work. It's because they knew it wasn't going to go super well. And they wanted to give the actors the pressure valve of being able to say, without feeling like they're blowing it, hey, I'm a human being and we're figuring this out together. That was my impression.
That makes sense.
It was really like for the performers to not feel as much pressure. Because that was the other thing about my host, who was, again, terrific, was like the very end when he was like, hooray and thank you and this is so wonderful. I've never heard a more like honest depiction of, I'm so glad that this didn't fall apart in front of you. And it did feel, that was the first indication I had that this thing was still in sort of previews, you know. And once I found out, you know, 10 minutes later talking to you guys that like, oh, they just started developing this 2 months ago, it made a lot of sense that of course they're like hanging on by a thread. And I
Oh, Kevin.
Oh, Kevin.
No.
Oh, man. I bet he has Optimum. This is an Optimum thing.
Kevin, come back.
Hanging by a thread, cut off.
Exactly. We're all hanging by a thread, waiting.
Maybe he's a mannequin now. He's like frozen.
Maybe Kevin this is all performance art. He's never actually been frozen this whole conversation.
Yeah. I want to second that while he's frozen and say that like I totally get that choice. It's just tricky, right? Because you're so deep. The onboarding to under is like the best onboarding I've ever had in VR, maybe, right? So it's in terms of like the grand app entrance 45-minute thing. And so you're so in world that it's just like, that's a hard thing for them to get away with, unfortunately. And I agree. It was like the one main thing that kind of made me like, what? Because they do such a good job of it. So it kind of almost shoots themselves in the foot of how good they are about creating a world. So I wonder if there's a way they could move it into the story a little more, or like when you're at the campfire, like you are, like the way that character appears is more alike the person. Like I felt a really big dissonance between the voice and the art, and was like, maybe if we're stepping back and you are the actor, can we like do that a little bit more with the environment as well? Because like I was all in, not expecting that. They almost needed to like undo their own onboarding in a weird way.
Yeah, I think the people who haven't already been in the under and therefore don't have as many expectations probably can come into this with a fresher perspective. Whereas like I wanted more the under tonality and things from that menacing world to creep into this, but this was just like a happy, fun theater camp kind of experience, which is great, but it wasn't what I was anticipating.
Yeah, there was a number of different times in which that fourth wall is broken, and just hearing from other people's experiences, it seems like it was maybe broken more often. And I agree that it was a more immersive experiences when there's no sort of self-referential like, hey, isn't this crazy that we're doing this thing in VR? You know, and more of because in any immersive story that you go and see, like a film festival, they have an installation, and that installation is like you trying to transition from the wide world and into like the first step into this magic circle, and then further immersed. And so the installation is trying to reduce the friction between that transition between the wide world and the world that you're entering. And so I saw that campfire as like that magic circle that they're trying to at least help to establish that, okay, now we're going to go deeper into like another level of inception, like, you know, going back to the virtual reality, which is sort of like layers of VR on top of VR on top of VR. And then each layer you go in, you sort of get more and more immersed. And so my experience was that I thought that the campfire conceit helped me to transition into this next, like this whole world that was much more fleshed out. And to see how like the storm and whatnot would sort of blur the lines of, you know, they're able to do some different things that allow you to, with the world building there, go into that magic circle that would normally be like the wide world installation, but to start to deconstruct it in a way that allows you to be more fully immersed into that world. But that decision to break the fourth wall in certain aspects and sort of call self to like, hey, I'm this big scary monster right now. I can see you guys down there dancing around, and it's sort of like, no, like don't do that as much. Just like, let's all pretend that we're really building this world, and we're gonna like all just suspend our disbelief. And I think I found that it worked better when I was able to fully suspend my disbelief without having to have any of those self-referential things.
Kathryn, did you think that the campfire intermission in the middle was necessary, or would you have preferred just campfire at the beginning, everything on Tempest Island, and then campfire at the end?
I'm not the biggest fan of bathroom jokes, but I have heard of people using that as an opportunity to explore the area more, so I kind of go back and forth on it, and obviously some characters lean more into the bathroom joke than others.
I think someone said that a lot of the shows aren't doing it now. Neither my show nor my wife's show had a bathroom joke, although Genevieve did just kind of say all of a sudden, like, oh, I need to leave for 2 minutes, like mid-sentence, and then came back 2 minutes later, and it didn't feel like it was a bathroom thing or planned or anything like that. What do you guys want to see next? What are you hoping the next phases for Tender Claws, for VR theater in general? I feel like this has been a very inspirational experience for a lot of people. So I'm curious what gears are turning right now.
I'll just say, I guess, sorry, that more people need to do it. I think they need more creators to be on that platform. They need to either curate more or encourage more and get more shows going. Because I know there is a market. I think we'll reach a saturation point where everyone's sick of the Tempest and want to see the next thing. And when you have the next thing and you have more resources to do that, people can experiment with different ways of interacting with each other and driving narrative in a connected digital space. That's what I want to see. Silence.
I want to see just 2 actors. Like the one actor thing is great. Maybe this is because I just watched Middleditch and Schwartz on Netflix and was very impressed by how much could happen with just 2 actors in that. But 2 of these under actors, and I've never actually been in the under when 2 actors were in there at the same time, but to start to allow a dynamic for them to play off each other and play more characters. And, you know, David and Kevin and I and some of the experiments that we've gotten to do with the Alive in Plastic Land stuff. I mean, obviously it can be incredible when you have 2 talented performers in their zone playing off each other. But in the same vein as what's been happening with the Under and the Tempest, I'd really like to see what something like that would start to look like.
It also, I think, would allow much more of this being able to calibrate to the audience's particular interest in interactivity versus narrative, right? Because having 2 actors means that it's easier to carry the narrative along if the audience is less interested in participating, right? So you get more flexibility. I just had this thought about how, you know, the evolution of Greek theater is, you know, they started where the shows were performed with just 1 actor, and then they went to 2 actors, and then they went to 3 actors. And maybe we're sort of in a similar mode with the VR theater.
Yes, similarly low bandwidth in those Greek theater connections.
Exactly.
Oof.
Yeah, especially
My business
higher
hat.
up on the.
They had Optimum back then as well.
Right.
My business hat's thinking there's a way to do that with just like segmenting a room to a performer and giving a slot and selling the slot out, and basically, sort of like Sleep No Dungeon Fell style, sort of get people through different rooms with different actors and sort of get everyone to try that. I can't wait to see the stuff that gets made next. I think this sets a really good bar for what's next. And I just want to make sure, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that this continues, because we don't want the Tempest to be the last thing for immersive theater and VR.
I was definitely jealous of the people in my group who got more attention, and I understand that it's like cost prohibitive, but like the more one-on-one stuff that can happen, I think it's just going to be that much more exciting. I mean, that's maybe the virtue of there being two actors, is that then you actually get to witness a relationship. So either the relationship is like you and the actor, or as it was with the sort of like one-to-many format, it kind of felt a little, I didn't really know where to focus, or sometimes I felt like I didn't need to be there.
I would like to see a couple of things. One is the concept of like a guided tour, where maybe like the world actually is interesting enough that if there was no actor at all, you could explore around and get a lot more context as to a world and the culture that world represents. Because I felt like I don't get a sense of the culture of this world that's created just by being able to see a few objects. Like it didn't feel like, Casper Sonnen told me that, a definition of interactivity is that the more you exert your agency, the more that the experience sort of rewards you for expressing that agency. And I don't think there was I think that sort of capped off very quickly. Like my exploration was like limited. Like if I would have spent 10 more minutes, I would have gotten more out of what I got from 2 minutes of exploring around. I want to be in a world where I want to feel hungry of not having enough time to explore around for hours and hours, but to maybe have the conceit of the actor taking me through this world. And so maybe as I'm locomoting through it, I'm getting to see glimpses of it and maybe sort of break off and express my agency in different ways, but have the world building aspect be something that's part of the theatrical production, because we don't typically associate theater with the world production, aside from a set design that's like pretty minimalist in a way. It's like they're able to actually do a lot of really interesting special effects within the Tempest that are really appreciated. But I think that in terms of just a world to be in and explore around, I would like to see maybe starting with a really robust world, and then from there having different stories that are playing out in different ways, where it gives me an opportunity to be in different areas and to really feel like I would just want to hang out in a place and really like if I want to make a decision to not pay attention to anything else that's happening and go off and just like look at the world that they've created, kind of like the Sleep No More-esque type of experience. Like if you don't want to watch any of the actors, you could explore that world and you could like go there like a dozen times and it would be very satisfying. And so I think that's the main thing, is both the world building, but also this conceit of like the guided tour where you're deliberately going through the world to show me these places that are connected to the story more deliberately, where I get a sense of this is where it actually happened.
There's a lot of Sleep No More, obviously, a lot of Sleep No More comparison here. And I think the thing that hasn't come up that I have heard anyway in the like discourse is, and forgive this humble brag, but I was at the dress rehearsal for Sleep No More, the final dress, because I'm amazingly cool. But what was incredible about it was like, there was about 1,000% more shit to do there than when I went back like a year later, and they had locked stuff off and they had closed a bunch of options, and there was way less agency because people were stealing and breaking things, because people are fundamentally terrible. And I think like again, this was built in a month, 2 months, whatever. Like there's no expectation that they would be wildly specific with all of their detail building and their world building, but like that's what I want. I like the idea of a show like Sleep No More that can exist free from the terrorism of your average theater goer, And the idea that this thing exists and you can't break anything should mean there's more reward for exploration, I think, or I would like it to ultimately. And again, it was so, they built it so fast, it's incredible.
And considering it's running until September, I wonder if Tempest is going to evolve at all. I mean, already it looks like a few things have changed since the press previews and where it is now. So, you know, it might be fun to go back in mid-August and see how familiar it is, even with, you know, even if you got the same host that you got before. Because there does seem to be some room to play, but it seems like other elements like the set design and the props and certain cues, like maybe that is baked into it. But it's certainly rife with potential, and I'm glad to see we're also excited about what this could mean for the future of VR narrative and live events. Anyone else want to give some closing thoughts before we sign off?
I have one other thought, which is that it would be nice to develop the ways of talking about the language about like how to describe the different actors and their approaches, because like if there was some way to be like, hey, this is how I'm going to like do this, and you'd be like, maybe read it and get a bit of an insight as to what you might get, because right now it feels like a little bit of a lottery of like, you just get it and you get who you get. But to be a little bit more of like, you know, if there's a specific thing that you know that you read like the 12 different approaches to this, and you're like, oh, I really want to try out these two. Or you hear from somebody, oh, I had this great experience with this specific actor, and then you want to go try that one out. But to be able to both have the ability to choose that, but then also potentially have the discourse and the ways of the language of how do you even describe that? Of like, how do you describe their approach and what you're going to get? So there's maybe less of a gap between what you expect and what you get.
It's like shopping for a therapist online.
The worst.
It's also, I was thinking, you know, because again, in traditional theater, right, the goal is that whoever's performing the role, it's basically the same story that's being told and the same experience for the audience. But of course, that's not true. And the way a lot of the selection is if it's a celebrity that people are already familiar with, then they're more likely to buy a ticket, right? But yeah, no, Ken, I think that's a really interesting idea. Like, if assuming that you're making a piece where the actors do have a lot of latitude for these different experiences, how do you describe that for the audience? Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, I just moved to Portland, and when you go into the legal dispensaries, they have, you know, a whole little chart in terms of, you know, what kind of experience you're looking for. And, you know, maybe we have like a Raptor, like, you know, Uber rating, which is like, oh, okay, if you're looking for like a touchy feeling, you know, kind of experience, then that's what you get. Or if you want somebody to really beat you up, then that's the other option.
I can't imagine a more apt metaphor than for like how to describe an actor than the like wildly random curatorial vocabulary of weed dispensaries. I'm gonna start teaching my NYU classes based on like indica v sativa to start.
Yeah,
that's so good, Sean.
That's great. And I would just say also just excited about all those things people are saying, and that it's all about more people having access in all ways, both creators and people and audiences, and then creating a new crop of creators as well. Like, I think it's not a coincidence that there are now 6 white men talking about this right now. And that is a really big problem. And we're going to recreate these same problems of theater for the past century plus, if again, and then have to undo it again, right? So I'm hopeful that by doing a lot of the things we actually laid out in terms of access and transparency, they can prevent that from happening. Because otherwise the people with privilege and power will continue to be the people with privilege and power, because we'll have the connections. It's just gonna be how it works currently. So hopefully, and I know that like this group of people like is actually committed to that. So it's not like a call out, right? So I'm hoping that that is heard by the people in power who maybe are scared of that transparency. Because this was such a gift, honestly, to all of us and to the community for Oculus to say, like, let's make this crazy weird thing in 2 months. Like, it's mind blowing that they said, okay, they gave Samantha and her team that power. And I'm really impressed by that. And so I'm hoping that they continue to take more risks like that.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah,
course.
definitely. Thanks
Oh,
for doing this, guys. It's been really great
Yeah, this
chatting
is
with
really
you,
cool.
with you all. Yeah, I'm
Sean and Kent, nice
very
to meet you
excited
both.
to see the show. They've given me a comp, so I'll get
Oh,
to see it
good.
later this week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though you just straight up didn't show up for your show, Slacker.
I showed up for the show in my time zone.
The show didn't show up for you. Yeah,
That's right.
Right.
quite literally. Yeah.
I mean, it is a little weird that there's no feedback. Like, if you're here for the show, you should go here or something like that. There's just like wait around and something will happen or not. And if it doesn't happen, there's no way to figure out what's going on.
I agree with you, but front of house is always the last consideration, even in traditional theater. It's not surprising to me that that was the thing they haven't gotten to.
Oh, no, of course not. And I think, and obviously because, again, we're talking about an industry that's sort of really coming from the video game thing where it's like, you buy the game and you go in the game and there's nothing, the idea of that degree of real-time customer service is really not built into the model yet. But I think it's something for us to keep in mind as we're thinking about stuff we're trying to make.
A lot of good lessons here. Thanks,
Nice.
everyone. This was a really wonderful chat. Till next time, I guess.
Yeah, I would love to hopefully
Can't
continue
wait.
to do this.
Yeah,
I
it'd be
think it's the
great.
kind of conversations that need to happen across different types of people. So hopefully there'll be more for us to consume and discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep an eye out for those.